I'm going to be showing you how to break your application into different modules in Angular. And I want to start by just going to the official documentation for modules and show you that page so that you can go ahead and read it. Obviously, we're not going to read the entire page, but technically a module is a grouping of related functionality that you can just run the application without having to have this functionality unless it's requested. And not only that, modules help you organize your code so that you don't have everything in one root module. And we're going to be looking at that once we go back to the code, because you'll see that our application is not that complex and our app module, which is the only module that we have, is huge with a lot of files. So over time, as your application grows, then it will become very hard to manage. And not only that, it allows you to do something that is very important in Angular, which is lazy loading, which means that unless I try to access a specific route, I'm not going to try to load the code for a module, or I'm not going to tell the browser to download the code for this particular module. And I'm going to show you an example of that as well. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see you can group components together with everything related to them. So for example, if I have a pipe and a service that I'm only using in say 3 different components, so I can create a module and then only load this code for this module. So that means their pipe, their service, everything associated with that module, only when I click on the link to load the component that one of these modules is a part of. That means that when I first go into the application, I'm not going to download a very big bundle because I haven't accessed those routes in the application yet. And another thing you can do with module is you can download these modules in the background. So you don't have to download them once you click on the specific link that's going to take you to a component that's going to download this bundle, because this will also make your application slow because you have to wait for the browser to download all these bundles. But what you can do with module is you can access a specific route, and then you have other modules that have not been downloaded yet, but then they're downloaded a little bit after in the background, so that whenever you access them, then they're available. So module really make Angular application very performant and load time when you're trying to access the application in a browser. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do. So make sure you access this link, and then you can read on what modules are and how you can create them. And also you can see the different types of module that exist. So if you open this NgModule here, and then you can see this type of feature module. So if you click on that, it will show you that you can create different types of modules that you see here. So shared modules, service modules, etc. So what I'm going to show you in this course is I'm going to show you how we're going to take this application, which is not too complicated, but it's not a very small application either. And then we're going to break it down into different modules. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do lazy loading so that we don't have to download a module, or we download it in the background unless we request a certain page or try to access a certain component. So this process is going to break the entire application. And I would really suggest that you pay a lot of attention on what we're doing, and make sure you rewatch the lectures if you need to, because this is not hard, but you really have to pay attention. Otherwise, you're going to break your application and it will be hard for you to fix because you won't know what's not working. So definitely pay close attention in the next lecture. So we're going to be introducing modules or feature modules in our application, and that's what we're going to be working on next. I'm going to close this window and we're going to go back to the application. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to talk about how we're going to break the application into different modules, because we're going to group things together. So the first thing that I want to do, I want to group together everything related to the authentication of the user. Well, maybe not authentication, but everything related to login, create an account, forget password, and all that stuff, and verify account. I'm going to group all of this together into one module. So this login page will be part of that module. The forget password will be part of that module, and also the create an account will be part of that module, including the verification. So when I'm verifying my account and when I'm verifying a link that I got to reset my password. So we're going to put all of these into one module. And another thing that I need to mention is one of the skills that you need to do this is to be able to determine how you're going to break the application down into different modules, because you as the developer, you have to make the decision to decide what will go together into one modules and what other things or other features or other components will go together in a different module. So for me, as you can see, that's what I'm doing right now, because I'm saying I want to have some kind of an auth module or authentication module, and I'm going to put together the register page, the forgot password, the login, and the verification page. So when I'm verifying my account or when I'm verifying a link for resetting my password, I'm going to put all of these together. So that's going to be one module. And then another thing that I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and log in gmail.com 3456 So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and for the profile, so you can see here, I can go to my profile. So I'm going to make everything related to this profile a separate module. So all of these different links, which could be their own component, but they're not their own component. So this is all one big page. So this is going to be its own module. So everything related to the profile of the user, I'm going to break this down to one module, and everything related to the customer, they're going to become one module. So this customer page, the customer list page here or component, and also the customer detail page, for example, this page or this component, they're going to become all one module. And then I'm going to do the same for the invoices. So everything related to invoices. So if I go to new invoice here and I go to all invoices, all of this is going to be part of one module, including their related services and everything that these components need to function properly. So we're going to make this into one module. And then lastly, I'm going to make the statistics. So the statistics at the top, I'm going to make that also one module. So I'm going to break the application down into multiple different modules. Now notice that when I log into the application, I'm immediately taken to the home page. So what I can do is I can make the home page also a separate module. So the home page itself is going to be another module. So that's a lot of modules we already have at this point. What I'm doing now is trying to determine how I'm going to group modules together and what will go into a module. But for your situation, this is something that you will have to do as the developer, like I mentioned, because you need to make the decision on what's going to be grouped together into one module. So for our application, we're going to have an authorization module. So when you're not logged in and you want to log in, reset your password, create a new account. So this is going to be one module. We're going to have a customer module. So for all the customer related stuff. And then we're going to have a home module for this home page. We're going to have an invoice module. It's the same way we have a customer module. So we're going to have another invoice module. We're going to have a navbar module because we can also break this down into its own module. We're going to have the profile module. So everything related to the profile of the user. And then we're going to have this statistics at the top. That's also going to be its own module. And then we're also going to have something called a core module and another module called shared module. So things that are shared throughout the entire application, we're going to put them in the shared module. And then things that are like super important, like they're like core, I guess you can say, for the application, then we're going to put them in something called a core module. So this is going to be pretty interesting, and definitely pay a lot of attention over the next few lectures, because you see now I have to create all these different modules and make sure that the application still works. And also get a copy of the code. Well, I give you guys the code in the zip file, so you can always go back to the course, go to the resources, and then download the code before I introduce this module. But I'm just saying that you really want to keep a copy of the previous version of the application before we start making changes and introducing modules into the application, because the application is going to look very, very different in terms of structure. And the two versions, so the one before introducing modules and the one when we introduce module in the application, they're not compatible. Like, it's either you have one or the other, like there's no in between. So that's why I'm making sure you understand that. It's either you run the previous version or you run the new version, because they're going to be completely different in terms of structure and how they work. All right, so hopefully you guys are ready, and the next thing I'm going to do is to start working on creating these modules, and that's what we're going to be working on next. So I'm going to go back and open the front-end application, and we're going to start making changes. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to create something called a core module, because if you look inside of the app module here and I scroll up, make sure I extend everything. So what we're trying to do is to break this module down because it's too big. Okay, you can see here, this is a very big module. So as the application grows, you can see that all the components are being imported here. Then it's going to become very large. This one file is going to become very large, and that's just not good for maintaining the application and for performance. And we won't be able to take advantage of lazy loading if we do not have different modules in the application. So the first thing we're going to be working on is something called the core module. So the core module is usually where you have all of your services that is being used in the application. So you put all your services in something called a core module. And also a module is just a simple class that is annotated with this NgModule. Okay, so as long as you have a class, as you can see here, this is a simple class, and then it has NgModule as a decorator, and that makes it a module from a purely technical standpoint. But I just explained a module to you conceptually. It's a way that you can break down your application, but technically speaking, a module is just a simple class with an annotation or decorator. In this case, annotation is used in Java world, but in Angular world, this is called a decorator. So the NgModule makes this class a module. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the core module. I'm just gonna go here and in the app folder, I'm gonna right click and then create a new folder. I'm just gonna call it core. Oops, I think that's a file. I'm gonna delete it and I'm going to right click here, new folder, core. So this is going to be the core module. So I'm going to create that file now. I'm going to say core.module.ts. Okay. So that's going to be the core module. So in this module, we're going to be putting all of our services. Now, if you go back to the app module, you can see that in the app module, we have the decorator, so NgModule, and the only thing we have is the providers that exist for the services. Okay, so you can see the different services that we have, they go into the providers. And even if we go, for example, to the, let's go to the user module, when we have this provided in root, that's what that means. It's going to be provided in the root module. I could have removed this provided in root and then passing these services inside of the app module inside of this array. Okay, so that's the same thing. So what I'm going to do is to just copy this class and then go to the core module and then paste it. Obviously, we're going to name this to core module. We can use the CLI to create modules, but I feel like if I use the CLI, then you won't understand what's going on, because the CLI is going to, create a lot of files and then update other files. And I want you to see the process like in its raw form. Obviously, if you're know what you're doing with the CLI, then you probably don't have to create all these files manually. So I'm just letting you know. So here again, remember the module, the core module that we're creating, it's only dealing with the providers, which is where we have all of our services, right? So then you can see here, we're also dealing with all these components. But we're creating a core module which only cares about the providers. So that means that we don't need this declaration because we're not going to be dealing with any module. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Okay. And also we don't need all of these imports because we don't need to bootstrap the application with the browser module. We don't need the app routing module. We don't need all these things because this is the core module. It's only dealing with the services. So we only need the providers array inside of this NgModule decorator. So I'm going to go ahead again, remove everything for the import. And also I don't need to bootstrap the application by calling the root of the module, which is this app module. So I'm going to delete this as well. So the core module is only dealing with the services, and that's what we have here. And then I'm gonna remove all of these imports where I'm getting the errors, and I'm gonna re-import everything. So I'm gonna do quick fix and then import all missing import, and then I'm gonna right click for my document. Okay, so let me make more room here. So this is the core module, right? Only dealing with services, which is what we have here. I'm gonna tap this in a little more. Okay, so we have these two services. Interceptors are services because if we go into them, you can see they have the injectable. So anything with the injectable decorator is a service. Okay, so let's close that off. Now we also need to pass the other services. So if we go inside of the service folder here, you can see we have customer service, HTTP cache service, and then we also have the user service. So we need to pass the services inside of these providers as well. So what I'm gonna do is to go inside of this array at the top here. I'm gonna say user service because we need that, customer service because we need that. We need the HTTP cache service. Okay, so we're importing the services because we know that the core module is dealing with services only. So let me make some more room and then format this again. And I'm gonna remove this HTTP module, also remove the browser module because we don't need that. Okay, so this is the core module. We have all of our services inside of this core module, and they all go inside of the providers array because that's where services go in Angular module. So now I can get rid of all of this code inside of the main component because I have this module now. I can just import this module. So let's go back. We're gonna do this step by step because I do want you guys to understand. So now we're gonna go here to the app module, and then we can just get rid of all these providers because we already have them somewhere else. So I'm gonna get rid of them, and then I'm just gonna say, well, now import the core module. Okay, that's it. So you can see this is getting really clean, and then now I can get rid of all of this import that I'm not using. Okay, make sure we don't have the HTTP intercept. Okay, so now you can see this is becoming clean. Instead of having another key here for providers and then put all the services, I just put them in one place in this core module. Okay, right here. And then now I import this core module, and then I can get rid of the providers array that I had in this module. Okay, so and also the associated import. So this is becoming a little bit cleaner. So this was the core module. Obviously, you can associate some of these services with other components. So for example, if I know that I'm only going to use the user service and the profile. So in this case, I don't even need to have this being shared to have this in the core module. I can only have it in the module for the profile or for the user in this case. That's the only place where the service is being used. But that's not the case for us because we're using this user service in like the home page and other places. So I'm just going to keep it here. And the same goes for the customer service and the cash service. So in our case, all the services can be put in the core module because they're being used throughout the entire application. Okay, so that's the first thing, creating the core module. Next, we're going to be creating something called a shared module, and I'm going to be explaining on what this is. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next lecture. So now what we're going to work on is the shared module. So let's close this. Okay, so for the shared module in Angular, we have ngIf, ngFor, like all the directives that we use, and then all the forms that we're using. So whenever we're using ngForm in the templates, like the HTML template, and then we have our pipe. So those things, you can consider them things that are shared throughout the entire application. So that's why the shared module come into the picture. So in the shared module, you usually have like the router module, the forms module, and also the browser module. So this module that you see here, because we needed to bootstrap certain things. So what we can do is to create a shared module that we can use throughout the entire application so that we don't have to define these things in the app module. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on that now. So back in the app, we're going to create another folder. We're going to call it shared. And then inside of this folder, we're going to create a file. We're going to call it shared.module.ts. Okay, so this is going to be the shared module. And I'm going to go back to the app module again, copy everything, and then paste it here. And then change the name to shared module. Okay, hopefully this process is not very confusing. So the shared module is going to have things like what gives the component access to their directives. So things like ngFor, ngIf, and those exist inside of this browser module. However, this browser module, in addition to providing all of the directives and stuff, it's doing some bootstrapping. Like it's bootstrapping the application in a way that should only be done once. Okay, so I can't just copy this browser module for the imports and then put it in the shared module, because the shared module is going to be shared across the entire application. So if I keep this here, this is going to be happening multiple times. So whenever the shared module is imported somewhere else in the application, like in some other component, then it's going to bootstrap the application from a bootstrapping perspective, like from a conception perspective. So we cannot put this anywhere twice in the application. This should only be put somewhere only once, which is in the app module. But we do need the directive. We need the components to have access to the directives because we're using ngFor and ngIf and the templates for this component. So what we can do is to use something else called a common module. So the common module is like a small set of the browser module, but it doesn't have all the bootstrapping stuff that happens in the browser module to initialize the Angular application. So instead of the browser module, we're going to pass something called a common module, because this will make sure that we have access to all the directive, but it's not going to bootstrap the application and try to initialize things that should be initialized once. Okay, so this is only going to happen in the root module, which is the app module. So hopefully this is making sense. So this is why we're using this common module. Now I don't need this app routing module because we're going to have a routing module itself. So I'm going to delete that. I don't need this HTTP client module. So I'm going to delete that, but I do need the forms module. So I'm going to delete the last one, but I'm going to keep the forms module because most of these components, they're using this forms module because they have forms in them. So the NgOnSubmit, the NgModule stuff that we're using on the form, they need this forms module. And the directive like the ngIf, ngFor, they need this common module, which is similar to the browser module. The browser module is like a superset of the common module, but we're not using the browser module because the browser module, in addition to giving us access to the directive, is doing some other bootstrapping stuff to initialize the application. And these things should only happen once, and we don't want that to happen, and that's why we're using this common module. Okay, that's what this is. And then another thing we need is the router module. Okay, because these components, they have routes like router link. I'm gonna format this. So they have the router link, so whenever we're trying to navigate to different route in the template. So we also need the router module as the import. Now another thing that they need is this pipe that we created, this extract array pipe, which is in the declaration. So what we're going to do, we're gonna go into the declaration, remove all the components. Obviously we're not dealing with any components in this case, and then keep the extract array value pipe, because we need to share this pipe as well. Remember, this is the shared module. Okay, and I'm gonna get rid of this and re-import them. I need to get rid of all this, delete, and all this stuff, delete. Okay, and then we're gonna re-import them again so that they can come from the correct place. All right, so remember, pipes goes into the declaration, so we're keeping the declaration, passing in only that pipe that we have. And also we need the router module because we need to share that across all the components. We need the comments module for the directive, and then we need the forms module for all of our forms. So these are gonna stay as well. Okay, just like that. We don't need any bootstrapping, so we're gonna remove that. But since we're importing these things in here, if we want them to be available or to be accessible by these other components, we need to export them. So here I'm gonna change this to export, and then I'm gonna pass in all of these because we need to import them in this module and also export them. Otherwise they won't be available to be used whenever we have this module anywhere. So for example, if I put this module in some other module or in the root module, for example, I put this module down here, then I'm not gonna have access to the router module, comment module, and forms module because they're not being exported. So we have to go here and then not only import them in this module so that they can exist in the shared module, but so that they can be accessible to wherever we import this shared module, we have to export them. So we have to make them accessible by passing them into this export array. Okay, so pipes and component, if we were also exporting component that would be shared across the application, which we would put in this shared module, they would go in the declaration, which is why we have the pipe and the declaration. We also need the form module, the router module, and the common module. Okay, I explain everything for forms, for directive, and for routing because we have routing in almost all of the templates of all the components, which is why we put this in the shared module because it's going to be shared across the application, and those go into the import array. But we also need to make sure that these can be available or accessible whenever we import the shared module anywhere. So we pass all of these into the export array. Okay, and then we're going to clean up here just like that, and then format. Okay, so that's what we're doing here, and I don't think we need this space. Okay, so that's all we need to do for the shared module. So let's make sure we clean this up real good. All right, so we have the shared module. We're not going to import the shared module inside of the app module right here. You know why? Because these things are only being used in the component. Okay, so the pipe, the router module, comments module, forms module, these are being used in the different components in the application. And the app module, really, if we go back into its template, so that would be the app component here. See, there's nothing in there. We just have the title. And if we go to its HTML template, just the router outlet is what we have. So that means that we don't need to share the pipe, everything else we have here in the app module because we don't need all these things in this module. We will be using this in other places though, but not in the root module. So that means that we don't even have to import it in this module because we don't need it. Okay, so now the only thing we have to do is to clean the app module because there's things that we're already doing in here. And these modules, they're going to be passed into the components, and these components, so the components will be using this shared module, and then this component will have their own module, and then these modules will be imported inside of this import. So we don't need to pass in this shared module here, and also we don't need this forms module here because we already have it in the shared module. You can see forms module. Okay, so I got rid of that here, and that's all we have to do. So let's make sure we clean the import for this as well. Okay, so this is getting smaller and smaller, and once we start working on the components module, then it's gonna get significantly small, so you'll see that. All right, so this is all we have to do for the shared module. So these are the things that are gonna be shared across all the different components in the application. So now I'm gonna close the shared module and also the app module, and then I'm gonna go back here and scroll up. So collapse all these. Okay, so this is our application, and then inside of this component we have all of the different components you can see here. So let's do some cleanup here. So the first thing that I need is to create an auth module. Okay, we talked about this in a previous lecture. So here I'm gonna create auth. Okay, you can call it authorization or whatever you like, and then in here I'm gonna take everything related to login, register, reset password, verify. I'm gonna put them all inside of this auth module. So I'm gonna click on this login, and then I'm gonna hold control, click on register, click on reset password, and verify. I'm gonna move them inside of this auth folder because I'm gonna create a module here. So I'm gonna click, drag, and move them in here, and I'm gonna say move. Okay, so we move everything related to login, register, reset password, verify account, or verify password. We move them all in here. Okay, you can see them all here. So now what we're going to do, we're gonna create another file inside of this auth, which is going to be the module. So we're going to say it's auth.module.ts because we need to export this module which is going to contain the functionality of all this login, register, reset password, etc. We can go to the app module because I want you to see that. And then I'm going to copy everything again. Of course, we're getting a bunch of errors because the path or the location for a lot of these components have changed because we moved the file to a different folder, but that doesn't matter. We're going to be cleaning this up anyway. But I'm just going to copy everything here. I'm going to paste it in here, and then I'm going to rename this. So we're going to name this the auth module. Okay, so this is the auth module, or the authorization or authentication module in this case. So remember, in here, what we're dealing with, if we go back to the app module, so we're dealing with just the components associated with login, register, etc. So I'm gonna make some more room here. So you can see that these are part of the declarations, okay? The components, including the pipe, but in this case, we're focusing on the components. These have to be in the declaration area. So in our auth module, we know we're dealing with not this pipe because this is coming from the shared module. We got rid of it. We're not dealing with the app component. That's not part of the component that we're dealing with, as you can see here. So we're going to get rid of it. Are we needing the login component? Yes, we're going to keep that. Register component? Yes, we're going to keep that. We're dealing with the verify component? Yes, we're going to keep that. We're dealing with the reset password component? Yes, we're going to keep that. And everything else can go. So the auth module is only dealing with login, register, reset password, and verify. Okay, so I'm gonna move reset password before like this. Okay, no reason. I just like it to be this way. Okay, so now I'm gonna get rid of all this stuff because you can see they're giving us errors because they're not coming from the right place. And then we're gonna re-import them. So here I'm gonna say quick fix and then add all missing imports. Okay, so in the declaration, we're only dealing with the login, register component, reset password component, and the verify component. Okay, so those are all the components that we're dealing with for the auth module, and they're all coming into the declaration because that's where you see that they were already declared in the main module. Okay, for the application, the app module, the components, they go inside of the declaration, and that's what we're doing here. Okay, we're putting them into the declaration because we're creating a module. So the same rule apply here. Obviously, we don't need this bootstrap. That's only going to happen in the root module, which is here. That's the only place where this is going to happen. It's not going to happen anywhere else. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to close this because I need to keep it here so you guys can understand the analogy that I'm making. Okay, so these are the components that we're going to be dealing with for this particular module. Now, what do we need in the import? So in the import, that's why we have the module that we need for these components to work normal because they have, you know, ngIf, so all the directive, they have forms and things like that. So what do we need in here? Well, what we need is the shared module. So we're going to say shared module. So if we go inside of the shared module, you can see we have the router, the common module for the directive, and the forms, and we're exporting those as well. So whenever we import this shared module here, we're going to have access to these four guys because they're being exported. And of course, we're using the pipe. So the pipe is then available to these components because it's part of the shared module and it's being exported here. So really important, not just importing them like we're doing here, but also exporting them. Okay, so that's what the shared module is bringing to all of these components. Okay, so we have it here. What else do we need for these components? Well, we know that they need the service. They need the user service, right? Because that's where all of the calls are being made to log in the user, register the user, etc. And because we're going to import this auth module inside of this app module, and this app module already has the core module. So this core module is going to give us access to the services. Okay, so we don't need to do anything here for the services. Well, here, because we know that we're going to get access to them when we import this in the app module, because the app module has the core module and the core module has all of the services. So that's taken care of. The last thing we need for this module to be complete is the route. Where's the route? Like, how are we going to navigate? Because the routes are defined in here in the app routing module, which is inside of this app module. And if we go here, these are all the routes. So we need to define another routing module for all of the auth route. So all of these guys. So I'm going to go inside of the app routing module, which is the main module that we have in the application now with all the routes being defined in one place. Copy everything, close off. Well, I'm not going to close off because I want to show you the, draw the analogy here. And then we're going to go back to the auth module. And then I'm going to create another file. So in here, I'm going to say new file. I'm going to name it auth-routing.module.ts. And then I'm going to paste everything in here. Okay, so now let's make some more room. So what do we need for the auth module? Well, we don't need this home component. We don't need to redirect to this home component. We don't need this home component again. We don't need anything invoice. We don't need anything customer. We don't need all this invoice stuff and all these customers. And we don't need the profile. So up to here, we're going to delete all of these routes. These are the only routes that we care about because these are the routes that are pointing to those components. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and then I'm going to delete everything because we need to re-import them and re-import it. So quick fix, add all missing importance. Okay, so these are the only routes that we need for the auth module. So then I'm going to rename this to auth routes. Okay, oops, wrong place, auth route. Okay, so these are the authorization or authentication, not authorization, authentication routes, and then we're going to pass them here. So hopefully this is making sense. So we're not changing these routes. They're going to stay the same, but they're going to be grouped together to this. We need to change this to auth. Okay, so this is change the name of the class. So this is the auth routing module. And now one other thing we have to do is to change this for root to for child. Okay, because this is going to be like part of a child route because we're going to import all of this stuff via the auth module inside of this guy right here. In this app module, we only need to have one for root. So everything else that we're going to create anywhere else in any other module that we're going to be importing inside of the app module, so the main module here, it has to be for child. It cannot be for root. We can only have one for root, which is going to be here in the app root. Okay, so now we have all of our routes for these components for this auth module and here. And you can see we're also exporting it. This router module for these children, for these routes, we're exporting it. Okay, so I'm gonna format this so everything looks clean. We don't have anything that we're not using. So now from this auth routing module, I need to import it in the auth module as for our routes. So I'm gonna copy the name, go in here. So in the auth module, and then I'm gonna edit as another import that we need. We need the auth routing module because we need access to our route. And then I'm gonna add the import. Okay. So that's all we need to do for this particular auth module. We have all of the components inside of that folder. We have the route, and then we also have the shared module, which is going to give us access to the directive, the form, etc. And then the services, they're already being imported by this core module. So now we can just import this auth module. So I'm going to copy the name to the app module, the root module. So here below the core module, I'm just going to say, I need now the auth module. And then import. Okay, so now we have the auth module. That means we can clean this up because we don't have to have all of these modules in here anymore. So the login can go, the register can go, verify can go, reset password can go, just like that. And we can also clear the import, remove. Okay, and remove the login. There we go. And I think we removed this by accident. And then I'm gonna go to the auth module. We need to clean this up as well. So remove all of these imports and make sure we import this. Okay. So it's giving me an error here. I don't know why, but maybe it will go away because I'm going to restart the application, but we don't have any errors here. That looks fine. And I'm also going to put all of this on one line, just like that. Okay. So this is the auth module. So we have the shared module and then the routing module, as you can see here, where we're passing in all of our routes. And then we have the components and the declaration. And then the services are being passed from the core module, which we have defined here. Okay. So that's all we have to do. So next, we're going to be working on the customer module. So the auth module is already done, so I can collapse this. Next, I want to create a customer module, and that's what we're going to be working on next. So I'm going to create the customer module, and the first thing I want to do is to rename this to something else. So we're going to say customer detail because I need to use this name for the module. So we're going to rename this to customer detail. Okay, so that's the customer detail page. Like when we load the customer, you can see here, and then we can update them. So that's their page, like the detail page of the customer. So I'm going to name this customer detail, and I'm going to go into the component. So in here, create another folder. I'm going to call it customer. And then I'm going to move everything in there. So the customer detail page, the customers, and also the new customers. We're going to move them inside of the customer, and then we're going to say move. Okay, so everything customer related belong to this customer. So again, in here, we're going to define customer module. So new file, customer.module.ts. And also we're going to define the route for this module. So we're going to create another file. We're going to say customer.routing.module.ts. Okay, so I'm gonna go and leverage some code inside of the auth module. So copy that, go inside of the customer module, paste that in, rename it to customer module, and we're gonna get rid of all these things because we're not gonna need any of them. We're gonna go with the customer component. We also need the new customer component, customer. We need to rename this to customer details. So let's go back. So the customer, like the simple customer detail here, this right here, we need to name it customer. I'm gonna right click and rename symbol. We're gonna rename it to customer detail component, and then change the name here as well. Okay, so customer detail component, we're gonna do the same for the CSS. So customer detail component, and also for the HTML, customer detail component, because we need to use the name customer to put everything under customer. Okay, so now we have everything we need. So we have the customer details, we have the customers, and then no customers. So we need to pass these three components to the customer module. So let's go back here. So we need the customer details component. So customers component, new customer component, and the customer details component. And then I'm gonna clean these imports. And we need the customer routing module. So I'm gonna say customer routing module because we need to define the route for this module, and that's gonna be defined in here. Let's copy from these routes, copy, close, and then inside of the customer routing module, we're gonna paste. And then we're gonna go to the app routing module, and then we're gonna get all of these out of here. Well, first of all, we need to clean and remove all of these, because these are part of the auth module. So we're gonna delete these and then clean these imports. The app is broken, it's giving us a lot of errors, but that's because we still have to do a lot of cleanup. Once we clean everything up, it will work. Okay, so we don't need these customers things in here, so we're gonna just cut them off. So I'm gonna copy all of these. Well, actually, I'm just gonna copy the whole thing. Go back to the customer routing. What did I just cut? Okay, the whole route. So I'm gonna replace this, and we're only gonna keep the ones concerning customers. So remove all of these like this. Okay, then we're gonna name this customer route. Okay, then we're gonna pass that in here. We're gonna change this. Well, this is already for child, and then we're gonna export that routing module, and then we're gonna rename this to, what did we name this? Customer routing module. Customer routing module. Okay. Remember, a module is just a class with a fancy decorator, which is NgModule. Okay, so let's make sure we import everything correctly. So remove all these imports and then re-import everything. Okay, so the customer routing module or the customer routes will have, well, we don't need this profile. Get rid of that and remove that import as well, because the profile is going to be its own module. So we need things related to customer. So customers new, of course, no invoice, remove invoice. And then customer, and then detail, which is the customer when we pass in the ID, and then we're gonna load the customer details component. And then these are protected routes. So we have the authentication guard, and I'm gonna get rid of all these two imports. Hopefully by now you can begin to see a pattern, but that's what we're gonna be doing for all of these different modules that we decide to put together. So the customer module is gonna have the routes for customers. So customers, customer new, and then the customers.id where we're gonna show the detail of the customer. These are protected routes, so passing the guard and then passing for child for these routes, and then we're gonna export this router module and also export this class. Okay, so this is it for the customer routing module. So I'm gonna close that and then make sure we can import it here. So quick fix, import, okay, and also import the shared module and import. And I'm getting an error here, not sure what this is about. So let me just delete it and re-import it again. So quick fix, import. Yeah, I feel like things will just fix themselves once we are done, because we have too many errors right now. So I can't really tell you that something is obviously not working because I'm not sure. Okay, so we have the customer module. So everything looks good here. And we need the shared module, the customer routing modules for now. So that's all we need. So I think we should be good. Let me make sure we have everything good. So customer details, let me see here. I'm getting an error. Okay, so that's probably why we're getting this error. So customer dash detail, and then we're gonna do the same here. Yeah, that's probably why. So customer detail, and if we can, you can see now the error is gone. Okay, customer detail had an error in it. So now we're good, and gonna remove some of this space. Okay, so customer module is done. So I'm gonna copy the name, and we can see that we don't have any errors. Everything looks green. And then now I can go to the app module. We need to clean this up. and then we're going to pass in the customer module. So pass in the customer module and import. Okay, now we can get rid of all things related to the customer inside of here. So this can go, the customers component can go, the new customers can go, and let's make sure, look here, new invoice, invoices, stats, navbar, home component profile, and then the pipe. The pipe can also go because we already have it. So let's remove all this stuff that we're not using like that and remove this. Okay, so you can see now everything is looking very clean and very lean. We have the core module, the auth module, the customer module, and we don't have any errors. Well, we have some errors in here, but we're not using these routes anymore. So this is the app routing module, like the core routes. So we're gonna remove everything here. Well, not the core routes, but the main routing module. So we're gonna remove these two because we don't need them here anymore. Delete, and also look at all this stuff. Okay, so this is all good. All right, so you can see it's looking really clean, and you're gonna be happy when you're done with this, and hopefully you understand everything. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. But you're starting to see a pattern, right? We put things together, we create a module for them, we create a route for them, and then we put them where they belong. And also remember to import what they need. For example, they need the shared module. So if you go inside of the shared module, that's the directive, the form, the routing, everything. Okay, so that's good. So the customer module is done, and it has customer detail, the customers, and also the new customer. Okay, so all of this is done. So I'm going to close everything here just to start from scratch and then collapse this. The next thing we're going to be working on is the home module. So you can see we have the home component here, but I'm going to turn this into a module, and that's what we're going to be working on next. So instead of the home module, I'm going to create another folder called home. I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to move the components file inside of this folder. Move. Okay, so everything is going to belong to the home/home. That's why we're going to have all the components. And then in the home folder, so the first one, I'm going to be creating the home.module.ts. I couldn't come up with a better name. And then we're going to create another file, which is the home-routing.module.ts. Okay, and again, we're gonna leverage some of the code that we have in the customer. So let's go here, we're gonna copy everything, and then we're gonna go to the home routing module, paste that in there. Gonna change this to home, well, not the home routing, just the home module. We're gonna change this to home. We're gonna get back to this, and then I'm gonna copy the customer routing module, copy everything here, and then collapse it back. And we're gonna go to the home routing module, and then paste everything here. Okay, so now let's first work on the home routing module. So just so you remember, let's go to the app routing module where we had all of the routes in one place. So you see that to go to the home page, we need this path right here. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy it, and I'm gonna go back, and then we're gonna get rid of everything here. Just put that one in the home routing module. So we need the home component, which is an empty path, and then it's gonna go to the home component, and it's a protected route. Get rid of all this. I can actually put this on one line since it's only one in there, just like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna change this to the home route. Pass this in here. Remember, this has to be for child. Export this router, and then export this home routing module. Okay, then we're gonna get rid of all these import, and then import the home component, import, just like that. So that's all we need for the home component. And I'm gonna tell you why we're not passing in these two at the bottom, because they're actually pointing to the home component, but we're gonna get back to that a little bit later. So this is it for the home component routing module. So we're gonna copy this name, gonna close out of here, and then we're gonna pass this in here instead, okay, because we need the routing for this particular module. And then the customer only, well, the home page only has one, and that's the home component. That's all we need. And then I'm gonna get rid of all this stuff that we're not using. The home module is going to be very simple because it only has one component, and we're giving it all the stuff it needs. So the directive, so if I go here, the pipe, the directive, the routes, the forms and everything. Well, we don't even need the form, but we don't have to break it down any further. So that's it for the home module, and it's going to live inside of this home folder. So we have home, and then we have the actual home routing module, the home module, and then the actual home, where we have all of the components and information. So I can copy this home module, go back into the app module, this main module here, and then I can pass it in here, home module, and then I can import, and then we're gonna clean everything we don't need here. We don't need this pipe. Okay, so that looks good. We don't need this in here anymore. Remove. And we also need to clean up the app routing module. I think we already removed it. Okay, we already removed it. We're gonna get back to these like I mentioned, but we should be good. So we have the auth module or the auth folder with all of their associated components in module, and the same for customer and also the same for home. Now we're going to do the invoice. That's what we're going to be working on next. So I'm going to close everything here again, and then we're going to go back to invoice. So you can see the invoice here. So I'm going to copy the invoices. So this right here, and then the new invoice. Well, I'm going to move them inside of invoice. Okay, I'm going to say move. So inside of invoice, I have the invoices, new invoice, and then I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call it invoice-detail. Press enter, and then I'm going to put the invoice in there. So all of these three, we're going to move them to invoice detail. Okay, close that. So invoice detail is where we fetch that one invoice. So you can see we accessing the activity route and then passing the invoice ID so that we can fetch this invoice. So I'm going to rename this to invoice detail. So invoice-detail, copy that name, press enter. I'm going to do the same for this, rename, enter. And then lastly for this, invoice detail. Okay. Because we need to use the invoice for the entire module or folder for the module and its associated components. So the invoice detail and then invoices and then new invoice, they're all together. So let me fix some of the stuff in the components here. So we need to make sure that this is invoice detail. Okay, because I don't want to have this error here. So we can close this off. So that looks good. So now we need to add in the files that we need. So we need one for the invoice.module.ts for the invoice module. And then we need one for the routes. So invoice.routing.module.ts. Supposed to be a dash. Okay, invoice routing module.ts. Similar story. So let me copy from the home module, paste in here, copy from the routing module, paste in the invoice routing. And then we're going to work on these. So we need to work on the invoice module. Okay. And then we need to work on the invoice routing module. Okay. Let's copy the invoice route. So let's go back here, go back to the app routing module. I'm going to copy the whole thing. I'm going to remove what I don't need. So in the invoice routing module, I'm going to paste that in there, and I'm going to call this invoice routes. And then we're going to get rid of all the routes that we're not using. So everything at the bottom here can go. Okay, so we have the, let's put the invoices first. So let's cut that off, paste it here. So we have invoices, and then we have invoice new. We don't need the customer. And then we have invoice, passing the ID and the invoice number. Okay, so let's get rid of everything we're not using and import these things now and change the name. Okay, and format. All right, that looks good. So hopefully you're starting to see a pattern here, and this is all coming together. But these are the routes that we're concerned with when it comes to invoice, and we pass them inside of the invoice routing module. So we're gonna copy that, and now we can go to the invoice and let's clean everything invoice related. So these two can be removed, and this last one can be removed as well, and this customer can be removed. Okay, and we're gonna remove these imports like that, put a space here. Okay, so you can see the app routing module, which was very big, now it's looking really slim. And then we need to go here inside of the invoice module. We're gonna pass in the components that are related to the invoice module. So that would be the invoices component. We have the new invoice component, and then we have the invoice detail. We need to rename it. So in the invoice detail, we need to rename this class to invoice detail component. Copy that, close, and then paste this here and make sure we can import it. Import, and then we're gonna get rid of all this stuff that we're not using. We don't need this. Okay, and after the shared module, we need to pass in the invoice routing module. So that's all we need for this. So we have the routing for this module and the invoice module. So now let's remove this here, just cleaning things up as I go and re-import it. Okay, because the files have been moved. All right, so this invoice routing module is complete. I'm gonna close it, and I'm gonna import that module in the app module. So we're gonna come down here. I'm gonna paste it right here. Okay. So we have the invoice module, import it, and then we're gonna get rid of everything invoice related. So no invoice can go, invoices and invoice can go. Then we're gonna do the same with the imports, remove, and remove the home component. Okay, so this is looking good. All right, I think that's everything, and you can see we don't have any errors or anything. So that's all we have to do for the invoice module. Okay, so this invoice module here is done. So we did the auth module, the customer module, the home module, and the invoice module. So next, we're gonna do the nav bar. So let's go ahead and work on that next. So the nav bar is going to be pretty simple. So I'm gonna close everything here, and I'm not gonna create a new folder this time because the nav bar is like very, very simple. So let's just create another file. We're gonna call it the nav bar module.ts. It's just gonna have a navbar module because there's no routing to go to the navbar, so it doesn't need a routing module. So the navbar is gonna have its component in files, so the CSS, the HTML, and the TS file, and then the module, which is the navbar.module.ts. And then we can just copy the invoice module information here, close, collapse, and then in here we're gonna just go ahead and paste it. And then we're gonna name this navbar module. Okay, navbar module, and let me collapse. And we only need the navbar, so we're gonna say navbar component. Okay, that's the only one we have, and that's the only one we're gonna have in here. But also remember, the navbar is being passed to other components. So if I go back, for example, to the home, and I go to the home page, so the home folder where the component files are, and then I go to the home component, remember we're passing in the navbar. You see it here, the navbar. So because of that, we need to export this navbar. Okay, so we're gonna declare it because we need to know which component we're working with for this module. We're gonna import the shared module. Okay. Remember, the shared module will give us access to routing and the directive and even the for, and then the forms module. We don't even need the form module, but again, breaking this down even further will require more effort, which you can do, but this is okay. And we can now export because we need to make sure that this can be accessible to other components. So in this case, we're gonna put it in the export. Oops. So in this case, we're gonna put the navbar component into the export array. Okay, because we're gonna be passing it in to other components. And then I'm gonna format this and get rid of all these imports here. So the navbar component is just gonna have the declaration for the navbar. So this is the component this is concerning. We need the shared module. So we're passing in the import for the shared module. And then we're gonna export it because it's being used in other component and we want it to be accessible. So we're putting it also in the export. So now what I can do is I can take the navbar and then import it where I need it. Because remember, this navbar, we only need it in the other components. So we can go back here and then go to, for example, the auth. And remember, in the auth, we're not using the navbar. There's no navbar in the login, no navbar in the register, in the reset password, or in the verify. So we don't need to pass in the navbar inside of the auth. So I'm gonna collapse this and I'm gonna go inside of the customers. So inside of the customer, I'm gonna go inside of the customer module. So remember, the customer module, it has all of these files, and these files, they have the navbar. Like if I scroll up here, you can see navbar. It's being imported or injected inside of this template for this component. So what I need to do inside of the if I go inside of the customers or customer module, is to import the navbar module. So here I'm gonna say I'm gonna need the navbar module because I'm using that in these components. Okay, so we pass in the navbar module here instead of the customer module. Okay, and it's probably giving us this error because we need to clean up the this here. So you can see the navbar is also here imported in the main root. So I'm gonna remove it and also remove the import for it. Okay, so you can already tell now we have to pass in this navbar module everywhere where we use this navbar. So let's copy this name, close pretty much everything here. So we did that in the customer. So we need to do it in the home because in the home page, we have the navbar. So I'm gonna go to the home module and then we're gonna import it as well. So we're gonna go here and then import it and make sure I can import this. So in the home module, we're importing the navbar module because we don't need to import it in the app root module. And then we need to do the same for the invoice. So let's go to the invoice and here we're gonna import the navbar module, import, and then I'm gonna close this. Okay, so we put the navbar module inside of the invoice, the home, and the customers because that's why it's needed. It's not needed in the app root module because we don't need to bootstrap it there. In the app root module, so the main module, we need to bootstrap these other guys like the auth, the customer, and then whenever we, for example, bootstrap the customer module, which in this case is this one right here, then it's gonna bootstrap its navbar because that's what it needs. But the root module, it doesn't need this navbar. it only needs this customer module because obviously we need to be able to see the customers and stuff. So organizing your code, breaking it down into different modules. Next, we're gonna work on the profile module. So if I collapse this customers, you can see the next one is the profile. Here we only have the component profile. So we're gonna break this into its own module, and that's what we're gonna be working on next. So I'm gonna close everything here, close all, and then I'm gonna create another folder. Well, not a file. I need to create another folder, and I'm gonna call it user, and then just move all the component stuff in there. So I'm gonna select all of them by holding the control key and then move them all to the user. And then inside of the profile, I'm gonna create the user.module.ts. You can structure this in any way you want. And then I'm also gonna create the routing module. So I'm gonna say user-routing.module.ts. Okay, and again, we're gonna leverage some code from maybe the invoice, copy all of this, put it in the user module, and copy the routing information, put it in the routing module. Okay, now we're gonna work with the user module. So I'm gonna name this user module. It's only gonna have the user component. Oh, actually, we need to rename this because I think it's named profile. So let's go back here. So we're inside of this right here. So let's just rename these to profile, or user in this case, not profile. So user, and then we're gonna make the same change here, rename user, and also last one, user. Okay, and then inside of the TS file, we need to change these as well. Change this to user, okay, and then close. So now we can go back to the user module, and we're gonna import the user component. We didn't change the class name. So instead of profile, I'm just gonna change it to user component. Copy and then paste, import it, import. And then I'm gonna get rid of this invoice routing module and clean these imports. And now let's go ahead and work on the user routing module. So let's go back to the app routing module. Now we need this one route, or I'm just gonna copy everything. Okay, and I'm gonna get rid of this profile, doesn't exist anymore. Get rid of this route in here because we won't need it in here anymore. And go back to the app routing, and then or the user routing in this case, and then remove everything else here. We're just gonna need this one to go to profile. I'm gonna make this a one-liner, pass in these user routes in here, copy and paste, and then get rid of all these imports. Okay, and we don't have this component anymore. It's called user component. Make sure this is imported and it's protected, so we have the can activate guard. So whenever we go to profile, we're gonna load the user component, and we're passing this route to the child for the router module, and then we're gonna name this user routing module. Copy this name. All right, format. Well, I'm not gonna format it. It's gonna put this on a separate line, and I want it to be on one line. Okay, so we're gonna close this and then go here and then maybe like import this here. Okay, because it needs its route, and import. Okay, so that looks good. So this is the user module. It's fairly simple. It needs the shared module, the user routing module, and the navbar, because we have the navbar at the top. And its component is the user component, which we rename. It was the profile component, and then we give this the name of user module. So this is pretty much done. We're now gonna go back to the app module, and then in here we're gonna import the user module. So I'm gonna place it here, okay, and import it, and then get rid of the profile and remove that one as well. Okay, so you can see now this is looking a lot better. Okay, so it's looking very small. It was really big before, but now it's very small. So the last one we have to do is the stats component, because this component is only being used on the home page. So there's no reason for us to bootstrap it in the app mod. So we're gonna be working on that next. So let's go back to maybe the user module, and then I'm just gonna copy everything here, and I'm gonna close everything, and then I'm gonna go to the stats. So we have the stats right here. So in here I'm just gonna create another module. So I'm gonna say stats.module.ts. Gonna paste this code in, I'm gonna rename it to stats. So this one is gonna be pretty simple because it doesn't have a lot going on for it. And then I'm gonna change this to the stats component. It needs the shared module, but it doesn't need anything else. So I'm gonna remove these. It doesn't need any routing. There's no routing to it. And we need to export it because it's being used again inside of the home. So inside of here, we're gonna say export, and then we're gonna pass in this array here. Oops. And it's going to be the stats component. Okay, we need to export it because it's being used inside of a template of another component. which is the home component. So that's all we have to do for the stats module. Again, there's no routing or anything. And now remember, the stat module or the stat component is only being used in the home. So we can just go into the home, go to the module, and then we can just import it as one of the dependency for this particular module. So we're gonna say stat module and then import. Okay, so that looks good. Now we have to go to the app module and get rid of that because we don't need it. Okay, so here you can see now we only have the app module or the app component, and then we have the imports for everything we need. So now let's go back to the top, and I just want to show you the same structure that we have. So if I expand this, you can see we have all the components, and then we have the routing module, and then the module for all of these grouping that we're doing. And that's the same for everything that we have. Okay, so it's the same structure, but it's gonna come down to you on how you want to break the application down. So we should be okay. If I didn't miss anything, we should be good to go now because we have all of these modules and everything is grouped together. Now the last thing that I want to do, if I close everything else, let me clean this imports right now. Okay, so we need to work on the routing, because if we go inside of the app routing module, you can see it looks like this. So that's what we're going to be working on next. So instead of the app routing module, I'm going to remove the redirect. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm also going to pass in the guard. So I'm going to copy everything here, and then I'm going to paste it here. And then I'm going to remove this empty because we already have one for the home component. So before I remove it, if I go inside of the home component, you can see we have the empty path that will take us to the home component. So we don't need to put this line here again. So I'm going to delete it. But we're going to say anything that they enter, like any path that they enter that is not defined, we're going to make sure that we load the home component. And of course, this is protected. So we're passing in the authentication. Well, I guess we can just still keep the redirect. So let's do Control Z. So we can just get rid of, let me just copy these and paste them here. So remove that last one because we can still do the redirect. So we're going to cut this off, put it at the top. So we're going to say if they enter anything that is empty, we're going to redirect them to the slash, which is the home. Okay, so that's what this is doing. And then we're going to say if they entered any other URL that doesn't exist, then we're going to go to the home component, and then this is also protected. So that's what we're going to need in the app routing module, right? So you can see now it only has really just one route in there because we had before all the different routes in there, but now we only have one. So the other thing we have to take into consideration is the order that we're passing in these. I'm going to close this too. So is the order where we have these imported. So remember, the app routing module has that one to catch all or empty. So that means that this has to go at the bottom because we want all of the other routes to be checked before Angular can go to say, okay, I didn't find the match. Because in Angular, the routing order is important. So since the app routing module has the catch-all, then it has to go at the bottom. So I'm going to cut this. The auth module, the customer module, the invoice module, they all have routing. So that's why it's important that we put this very last. So I'm going to put it at the bottom here. Okay, because it's the catch-all. It has the catch-all for all the routes that they entered that we don't have in the application, and then we're going to redirect them back to the home page. So make sure that you have the app routing module at the bottom. So for our declaration, we're only gonna need the app component. So that's that. We need the browser module for all the bootstrapping. We need the HTTP client module, and then we need the core module. We need the auth module. We need the customer module. We need the invoice module. We need the user module. We need the home module, and then we pass in the app routing module. And let me make sure we don't have any imports that we're not using. So everything looks good. So if I didn't make any mistakes or anything, we should be able to see the application working just like before. Like nothing should be broken, and I can collapse this now. So everything should work the same way, because really what we just did is just break this down into smaller pieces, and then we put all the smaller pieces together. So what I'm gonna be doing next is to test the application and make sure it's working. So that's what we're gonna be working on next. So I'm gonna close everything here, and I'm gonna go back to the terminal. So let me bring that up here. I'm just gonna stop everything, clear, and then we're gonna do ng-serve. We're just gonna wait to make sure that the application is running, because I don't know if I don't have any errors. So just give this a second to load, and voila, you can see we have no errors. So that means everything should be working as before. So let's go ahead and test that out. So I can already see that I'm back in the application. So because I was already logged in. So let's navigate. Navigation is working. Okay, you can see we can navigate and I can view a customer working. I can update a customer also working. Well, I'm going to change this to 555 and then save. And you can see the changes reflected here. I can go back to all the customers. I can search, it's working. Search for J, search, working. Search for maybe T, working. We have 3 pages. Okay. And I can view from here as well. It's working. Go back. I can go to the homepage. We can see the statistics is here. I can download the report and just click on that. Open. Okay. Report seems to be working. Let's just give it a second. All right. There we go. So report is working. Okay. Gonna close that. And we're gonna go to invoice. New invoice. Seems to be working. Let's just test this out. 1 haircut for $40. And we're gonna select Matty again. Let's say 50. Select the date. Save. Okay, working. Now if we go to invoices and you can see 1 haircut for $40, we can go to print. So I click on print and I can see that the route changed, but we didn't get navigated to this invoice detail page. So let's go back to the app and see if we can debug that. So let's go to the components and we want to go to invoices. So I see this is red. So we have invoices ID. That's going to load the invoices component. Okay, so this is the problem. So this loads the invoices component. It's supposed to load the invoice detail component. There we go. Okay, so now if we go back, we should already see it. There we go, because it reloads the page. So let's go back again and then click. There we go. Let's export as a PDF. Okay, it's downloaded. I don't want to open it in the browser. So I'm going to open it in my file explorer. I'm going to double click on it and bring it over and you can see it's right here. Okay, so the invoice is working, so that's good. Gonna close out of here and we create a new invoice. We can see all the invoices, we can print them, can go back to all invoices. Now let's check the profile. So I can go to my profile, I can update it, give it a second. Okay, password, I mean all of these should be working. Change to admin, update. We should see the permissions change. Go back to super admin, update. We're back to super admin account. Okay, authentication, enable, give it a second. Okay, I can disable it. Let's give it a second again. And I can see all the activities. So you can see all the MFA update, role update, profile update, and the login information. So everything seems to be working. We had a tiny error in the all invoices because we weren't showing the proper component, but we just fixed that real quick. So everything seems to be working as expected when we're logged in. So let's check out when we're not logged in. Log out, forgot password. gmail.com. Set password. Okay, so we should be good. Obviously I'm not gonna get an email, but can I create another account? Test at gmail.com. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Again, 1 2 3 4 5 6 is my favorite password. Create account. Let's give it a second here and let's wait. There we go. I can create another account. Works. Go back to login. Junior at gmail.com. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Enter. Give it a second. Okay, and we're back in. So everything seems to be working. Nothing is broken. Obviously, I did this before. I made the application modular. Like I created all the feature modules. So that's what we just did. If I go back again to the application, so I'm gonna close this. So everything we did here. So those are called feature modules. Okay, so all these modules like this auth module, customer modules, home modules, they're called feature module, which means that they're part of a bigger structure, which is the app module. Okay, so all these feature modules, they're getting imported inside of this app module. So that's why they're called feature modules, because they're part of a bigger module. So they're called feature module. So that's what this is. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is I'm going to show you how we're going to lazily load the profile module. Because for example, I can log into the application and let's say I'm not worried about my profile or updating my password or anything, but I need to work. Let's say I was an employee at this company, for example, right? So I would log in and navigate the customers, maybe add no invoices or add no customers or call customers and remind them that they have to pay invoices and things like that. I could just use the application for a long time and never go to my profile because I don't have anything to do with my profile. Now I'm just taking a random example so that I can show you a case scenario. So what I'm going to show you how to do is how to lazily load the profile, which means we're not going to load any of the code that is associated with the profile unless we go to the profile, unless we click on our name and then access this page. Otherwise, we're not going to download the bundles like the JS bundle, like the JavaScript bundle to the browser whenever we load this entire application unless we go to the profile. So that's just a way that you can enhance your performance. And you can do that only when you have different modules in your application because you can group your routes together in different modules. So I'm going to show you how we can use lazy loading and then make the application perform a little better. So that's what we're going to be working on next. So let's go back to the code. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go inside of the profile and then we're going to go inside of the routing, okay, for the profile module or the user module. I'm going to pass in the path of empty and then I'm going to pass this in as a children. So I'm going to say children and then I'm going to pass this as an array. Okay, so we're going to say array and I'm going to delete this. So in the array, we need to pass in an object. So I'm going to say open curly braces, and then we need to pass in the path. So here I'm going to pass in path. And again, I'm going to pass in empty path because I don't want to have anything else other than the same original path. And maybe that's not making sense, but I'm going to explain what that means. And then we need to close this array. So I'm going to go here and then close that off. And maybe I'm going to break this down into a new line. So we have the same array for the route. We're going to pass in the path of empty, and then we're going to load a child or children, but since we only have one, I'm just going to say a child, but you're going to load children, which takes an array. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pass in another path, which is empty because Control Z, I don't want to have anything else. I still want to go to /profile to load this component. And then I'm going to pass in the component and then pass in the guard. Okay. And then we need the closing curly brace here. Okay. So this is the first change that we have to do in here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this off. And then now I'm going to go inside of the app routing module. So this one right here. And then I'm going to pass in a route before the catch-all. Okay, so the catch-all should always be at the bottom. So inside of these routes, I'm going to pass in another route. So I'm going to put on curly braces for the object. I'm going to pass in the path. I'm going to say whenever they go to profile, okay, so we're only going to use this profile, which is why I put empty inside of the app routing. So it's going to be empty, so that the same profile can still work. Because if we, for example, say if they go to, I don't know, user, like profile user detail, then we would have to change this route. But I want it to be profile that will take me all the way to this user component. So I'm just keeping the path as empty. Okay, so back here, I'm gonna say whenever they go to profile, what I wanna do is I want to load children. So I'm gonna say load children. Load children is a callback. So I'm gonna say we're gonna have a callback function, and then we're gonna say whenever this occurs, which means whenever they go to this profile, that's when you're gonna import the user module or the profile module. So here I'm going to pass in import, and we're going to say that, and we want to go to the component, we want to go to /profile, and we want to go to /user module. Okay, that's when we're going to load this entire module because it's a callback. So whenever we load this, then because it's a callback, like I mentioned, we're going to say for this module, we're going to load it. So we're going to say then you're going to do something like module.user module. Okay. So what Angular is going to do, it's not going to load this module at all unless we click on this. So that's one way to do it. Now, another thing we can do, we can say whenever we load the application in the background, just load this module so that if we click on it, it doesn't have to wait. Like the user will not see that the application is trying to download this bundle, which is the entire user module bundle, and then show the profile page, right? So we want that whenever the user accesses the application and then let's say they go to the homepage. So the homepage is presented to them. In the background, we want Angular to download this bundle. So on the initial, let's say clicking on the homepage or going to the login page, this bundle will not be loaded. But we wanted to do that in the background so that in case the user clicks on it, then the user doesn't have to wait for Angular to download this entire bundle. Say if this was a very large bundle, because we don't want to show any delay. So in this case, there's another property that you can pass here. So we will say, well, we have to go in there. So after we pass in the route, we can pass in another object, and we can pass in something called a preloading strategy. And this can take two options. So there is a preload all module. That's the one that we want. So it's going to go ahead and preload all the modules in the background so that in case the user clicks on them, then they don't have to wait for the bundle to be downloaded on the browser and then show them the page. And let's go back to the app, and I should probably show you this as well. So if I put preloading strategy, you can see we have no preloading and then preloading all modules. So I'm going to open both of them. So no preloading means we're not going to try to preload anything. You can see it here. We're not going to try to preload any module, okay, unless we click. And that's the one that we have by default. You can see this strategy is enabled by default. But in our case, we wanted to preload those modules in the background. Okay, so that's why we changed the strategy to preload all modules. In case the user clicks on them, then the user doesn't have to wait. Now, it's gonna depend on your application and what you're trying to do, which one you want to use. Okay, it depends on, I would say it depends on the size of the bundle and probably like other factors like your internet connections and things like that. But I know that this is not a super big bundle, so I'm telling Angular to preload it in the background. Okay, so now if we go back and let's close these, well, hopefully you guys know how to get to these. You can just Google, Angular preloading strategy, and then they will come up. So let's go back, and I'm gonna reload the application, and we're still on the same page, so I'm probably gonna like stop it and then rerun it again. So ng serve, we're gonna give it a second to start. Okay, so we're up and running. And I see that we're still on the same page. So we have to go back to the app. And so this is all good. There's no problem here, but we have to go to the app module. So in here now, we don't need this user module in here anymore. So I'm gonna remove it, okay? And also remove the import because we're lazily loading it. So we don't need it to be loaded by default in this app module. So now if we go back and reload, now you can see now it's taking me to this page, to the home page appropriately. So if I right click and go to inspect, and I'm gonna go to here, and then I'm gonna zoom in a little, and then I'm gonna reload the application, and you can see we have our appropriate logs, and I'm gonna clear this, and then I'm gonna click and then go to my name, and you can see that everything is working as expected, right? So I'm showing you that we have no problem. Everything is working. There shouldn't be any errors or anything like that, and we can update our information, and you can test this further if you would like. So now if we go back to the code, so that's what this strategy is doing. It's preloading everything so that it doesn't have to load it when we click on this particular route. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you that right now. So if we go back to let's open the terminal, and I'm gonna see if I can bring this up and do Control-C, and then I'm gonna clear this. And then I'm gonna see if I can make it a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna make it bigger like this, and I'm gonna zoom in a little so you guys can see better. And then I'm gonna run the application again. I'm gonna say ng-serve, and then I'm gonna show you how Angular, after loading the main bundles, so everything that's not part of the lazy loading, then it's gonna load the profile module, and you're gonna see that. Okay, so the application is up and running, and we have the errors that we're gonna fix later. So now if I scroll up and look what we have, so you see the initial chunk file. So these are everything that is not lazily loaded. Okay, so those are like all the different modules that were lazily loaded. So what Angular did, Angular loaded all of these different modules, and then later it loaded the module for the user. You can see the profile user module. So what it did is it's gonna load these first so that it doesn't show any delay for the starting of the application. And then later it's gonna load these other bundles. So now you guys understand what's happening here. Okay, so it's loading these after it loads the main bundle of the application. So if we didn't have the configuration here for preloading all module, it would only do this part whenever we click on the profile, okay? But as of right now, everything should be working. We shouldn't have any problem in the application. So we're gonna go to the home page, go to the profile, and everything should be working as expected. And our application performs a little better now. So the next thing that I wanna do, I wanna show you why we've been using observables throughout the entire application, and that's also in relation to performance. So I'm going to show you how we're going to improve our performance a little bit by using observables throughout the entire application. So that's what we're going to be working on next. There's a question that I think you might be asking yourself, which is, why would you try to build your application using the reactive approach when you can just use, the procedural approach and everything would work fine? Well, in addition to all the advantages of not having to subscribe and unsubscribe in the components, you also have performance advantage. So Angular in the backend use something called a change detection strategy. And by default, it's going to use the check always strategy, which is always going to be checking for changes in a component and then update the UI appropriately. And what Angular is doing is it's looking for every change in all your components for everything that is bound in the UI, and then update everything appropriately in case there's a change in the component. However, when you use a reactive approach, you have the option to use the onPush strategy, which is only going to look for change when there is an input change. So if you're using the input and then there's a change on that property on the class, or when you're using event emitters and then there's an event that is emitted, or in our case, when you're using observable and the observable emits. So because we're only using observable and we're subscribing in the template or in the UI using the async pipe, we can actually improve our entire application performance by using the onPush change detection. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do this right now. And inside of the, let's say the auth, so I'm going to go inside of every single one of these components, the TS file, and then I'm going to scroll all the way up here. And then inside of the component decorator, I'm going to go in here and then I'm going to add another property called change detection. And I'm going to do change detection dot onPush. And I'm going to have to do this in every one of these components. So let's close this off. And then I want to go to the register and go to the top, paste that in there. Make sure I import this from Angular core. Close. We need to do the same for the reset password. Go here, paste, then import, close. We're gonna do the same for the verify. Then we're gonna paste, then import. I'm just gonna go ahead and do this for everything. I'm just gonna fast forward the video. So this is definitely not a good use of your time. So let me do that. And then I'm gonna come back. So I added the onPush detection strategy in all of our components so that Angular doesn't have to be repeatedly looking for all kinds of changes that can happen, but only looking for input change, observable change, and whenever an event is emitted. So this is gonna significantly improve our application performance because the change detection strategy really takes a toll on Angular when it comes to performance because it's watching for every single variable that you have defined in your application. But in this case, we're only gonna make it watch for when an event emit, when an observable emit, and when there's a change for an input decorator like this. So I'm gonna close everything again. And if we go back, we're probably not gonna see any changes. So let me reload. I'm gonna have to stop and rerun. So let's go back and let's just stop this. And then we're gonna say ng serve and give this a moment to start. Okay, so it looks like we're good. And you can see everything should be working as expected. Obviously, you're not gonna see any changes because you don't have a big, large application. But if you had a large application and you had like tons of variables defined in every single one of these components, then you would see some difference. But it's always good that you use the best practice or design your application in a way that makes it as performant as possible. So that's all we're going to be doing for this section. I think the last thing we have to work on is the notification. So for example, if I view a customer and then I save their information, then we want to see a little message that comes to the side that says, customer was saved successfully. Or if I try to log in and I don't have permission, then I need to see some kind of notification. So I think that's the last thing that we have to work on, which is the notification service, so that we can show the notifications in the application. You can choose to show them wherever, like top right, top left, or bottom right or bottom left. But in my case, I'm just going to show them at the bottom left corner. It's going to be pretty easy to implement. So that's what we're going to be working on next. But at this point, you should have a totally, fully working application that performs very well, at least in the Angular ecosystem. So again, congratulations for making it so far. And of course, if you have any questions, do let me know before you move on to the next section. The next section is going to be pretty easy, like I mentioned. So it's not going to be super long. We're just going to make sure that we send notifications so that the application as a whole can be a little bit more interactive. So that's what we're going to be working on next.